Hey y'all, I hope y'all are doing well. I have COVID, so I'm at home. I actually don't feel very bad now, so I was like, I'm gonna just make a video for my students and just like see what we can do. So on Tuesday, I was a lot sicker than I am today, and so I apologize for any confusion, especially about the Remind stuff. But I wanted to show you that we do have Remind, and I'm gonna tell your substitute if you feel like it, you can stop this video at any point and just kind of like do some stuff. But one of the first things I wanted to show you was that now this Remind stuff is up. And if you click on this app, and you can do it on your phone, if you click on this app, you should be able to sign up for Remind and send me a text. So I would love for you to take a second and do that. Um, and just, I mean, you could just say, hey, whatever. And I'll be back on Tuesday. So if there's still any confusion, we'll just work through that. Okay, that's the first thing. So now I want to talk about Thomas Harriot. And so I have a couple things that I have going. Usually I have a PowerPoint and a book that I show my students, but since I'm at home, I don't have either one of those. So I'm going to show you what I got and we're going to work with that. So one of the first things I wanted to show you, and this is probably one of my very favorite things about the Harriet piece, it actually came really illustrated by this guy named John White. An interesting thing about John White was he was the grandfather of Virginia Dare. And you might be like, who is Virginia Dare? I feel like I've heard of that if I know anything about North Carolina history. Well, she was, I think, the first European baby born in the Americas. And she was also a member of the Lost Colony. So he was her granddad, and he never saw her again after he actually left. He was not a member of it. But anyway, so anyway, I just wanted to show you this specific illustration of the Harriet piece. So a lot of times people look at Thomas Harriot and they're like, man, he just seems kind of nice. This is just anthropological study. I don't believe so. So I look at this piece and it's called the Garden of Eden. And so, I mean, we see some kind of like typical Garden of Eden-y things here, right? I mean, some of these animals look really weird. I'm not gonna lie. Like, why are they so skinny and why is his head so weird? But anyway, the thing that I wanted to show you is back here in the background, we have these two probably European looking people here looking at the tree, Garden of Eden, probably thinking about starting a new life. But look what's happening in the background. We have someone, if you can actually find this picture online, but we have somebody, probably a Native American, working in the background. And so then happens again over here. So I think this kind of, to me, this was one of the earlier pictures in the book too. But I think for me, that kind of sets the tone for this piece. And I start to think, do I really think that Harriet had these great motives? Because he seems pretty nice throughout, but I'm not sure. So, what I want to do with this class is I want you to think about that question that you got asked for homework. What was their like motivation? What was their purpose for writing? And so, a lot of times I let my students lead me there, but since I don't have the luxury of a conversation with y'all, I'm going to talk through it a little bit differently. So, the first thing I want you to do is I want you to go in and see if you can find examples of Harriet sizing up the Native Americans. And what I mean by that, it seems like all throughout he's like, well, they have this village, it has this number of places. I'm not going to give you much more. See if you can find some examples of that. And then I want you to talk to yourself and think, why would he have those things? And if you want to, you can actually stop the recording now and talk about that or write those down. I think that would be a great thing to do right now. So examples of Harriet sizing up the Native Americans. And y'all can stop right now. So then, the next question that I have for you, and you don't have to stop this thing if you don't want to, but the next question I have for you is, do you find examples of Harriet devaluing the Native Americans' religion? And I think you could probably find quite a few examples. I think one of my favorite examples, again, I don't have the book, so I'm going back from my memory, but one of my favorite examples is when he was talking about how they were so moved by the Bible that they were rubbing it up and down on their body. Like, I just think he's so arrogant and like, he just thinks he's so superior to the Native Americans when he's like, oh, they don't even know what they're doing. They're rubbing it in. And so I think that's really interesting too. So I would like for you to see if you can find examples of that as well. Now, when we start talking about that, think about the audience. Who would have been reading this and what would have been the purpose? We know that Harriet was commissioned by Sir Walter Raleigh. And basically, what they were trying to do was they were trying to get more people to come to the New World. That's an obvious answer, right? I would say, though, if we dig deeper, we might look into how. And if we think about him sizing up the Native Americans and devaluing the religion, we kind of start to see a bigger picture of what how he writes this piece to encourage people to come to America. So I'm going to let you get there yourself. And if you feel like you don't have an answer to that, when I come back on Tuesday, I'm going to answer that question for you. But I would love for you to get in groups and kind of discuss that for a little while. And then we're going to move on to Smith. Okay, so when we move on to Smith, um, I want to talk a little bit about the timeline of Smith, because like sometimes we don't really understand when he was here versus when like I think the Mayflower came is my biggest thing. So he was here in 1607, so that was really still pretty early. Or Jamestown was established in 1607. That was really pretty early in America's history, and so I want to talk about a couple of these slides. I'm not going to go through the whole thing with you, but one of the biggest things is 1607. Then, if we look at it, it wasn't until 1619 that slavery started in America. But think about that. If it was 1607 when our first colony was established, 1619, 12 years later. So our country basically has a history of slavery from almost its onset. So that's the only reason I really show you this. And then 1620, that's when the Mayflower came. And then we know 1621, first Thanksgiving. This is another just page, the title page of this. And then I wanted to show you kind of like what Americans think of John Smith versus what he really was. So as you can see, we have this wonderful looking blonde man, but really Smith was probably more like this kind of old dude. So that's all I have there. We really have mythologized this guy, and he really probably wasn't worth the mythology. Pocahontas, this was still a painting. This is not a picture of Pocahontas. But again, we see her as almost like, if you look at this dress, really a sexualized woman. And she was a child. She was really, really young. She was probably 12 to his kind of old man stuff. So that's all I wanted to show you there. And so my thoughts with this one were I want you to find some examples of Smith exaggerating. And I want you to think about why Smith would exaggerate. And probably the biggest reason we have for this, and this has more to do with the history, so that's why I want to give it to you. This piece was written after Smith came back, 10 years after Smith came back to England. Everybody hated him. They always hated him. He was like on the boat to America, and they were like, hey, when we get to America, let's kill him. Like they were going to kill Smith. So they were like, okay. But then there was this secret envelope that the British had given the people on the ship, and they were like, in this envelope, don't you peek, in this envelope is the name of your new governor. And so they didn't peek, and so when they got to America, it was Smith. So they couldn't kill him anymore. They had to listen to him. So that was already a pretty tumultuous start. So then they just didn't like him. He was just kind of a forceful guy anyway, and he was great in some ways, but forceful for the most part. Anyway, so then he had his adventures or whatever, and one day he was asleep on a boat, and there was some gunpowder that mysteriously went off in his lap, and he was so injured that he had to go back to England in shame because he'd had his lap blown up, whatever you will with that. And so he had been kind of shamed when he was gone, when he went back to America. And so he wrote this piece 10 years later. And so some people think that this was him like trying to save his reputation. Some people think that's why Pocahontas was mentioned at all, because she had come into favor with the British because she'd actually gone over to England, and had become quite popular. And so that may be why there is that tiny reference to Pocahontas. He did know her, but I don't know that he wasn't just name dropping Pocahontas here. So, what I want you to do now, and I promise I'm not going to talk much longer, but what I want you to do now is I want you to do a couple of things. Number one, of I want you to find examples of not Pocahontas, Smith exaggerating things that happened to him. If you can't find it, you haven't read too much. Now, I will agree, this is a complicated piece. So please, if you don't, you'll find some. So see if you can find some examples. I've got a couple great ones, but I don't want to bring them up because then it might step on yours. So see if you can find some. And then, I have a couple more examples. And then I want you to also see if you can find some examples of him questioning the credibility and why he would do that. Why would he question the credibility of his superiors? And I think about all of this. Why? Why? So, what I'm going to do is I'm going to put this little document, I'm going to save it here in a second. I'm going to put this document up in the announcements, and I'm going to post this video on YouTube so you can always go back to it. But so what my hope for this class is that you'll divide yourself into groups and you'll talk about some of this stuff and you'll come to some conclusions. If you feel like after this kind of discussion you haven't, and y'all can divide into groups however y'all feel like comfortable doing it. But obviously, if you feel like you haven't come to those, let's talk again on Tuesday when I see you again. I'll be well. My brain won't quite be on as much fire. And so if you have any questions, go ahead and send them on Remind just so you kind of get used to using that because I really, really like that whenever it's like after hours or something like that, it's a lot easier for me to check my phone there than it is to check my email for whatever reason. So I would say go ahead and do that. And please, y'all, I'm feeling a lot better, so don't hesitate if you have any questions. Okay, y'all, have a good day. Bye.